counsel, and members of the jury. Every choice the defendant made was all a part of her plan. All throughout today's trial, opposing counsel, they asked all of the witnesses about wristbands that they saw in 2010. They asked all of the witnesses questions about Ms. Bowman's involvement with wristbands in 2011. Members of the jury, when they did that, they were missing the point. Because today's case is about 2012 and the choices that the defendant made that year to help her partner to commit 3 different crimes. This case was about the choices that the defendant made, choices that were all a part of her plan, and a plan that ultimately led to the death of Winston Thomas. That's why we're here today. And as the state, we have the burden of proof in today's case. It was our job to prove to you today, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant helped her partner to commit 3 separate crimes. We didn't have to prove this to you today beyond all doubt. Just a doubt based on reason or a doubt based on common sense. What we had to show you is that the defendant helped her partner to commit theft by deception and then 2 separate crimes, the robbery in the first degree and murder. So let's take those one at a time. That first charge is of theft by deception. To prove that, all we had to show is that the defendant helped her partner take just $500 from the ticket booth using those fake wristbands. Now, let's think back to what we heard today. The park's owner took that stand, and you have the financial records in front of you. We learned today that the park lost thousands of dollars the same year that the fake wristband was in the park. So we've met that portion of the burden. We've met that element beyond a reasonable doubt. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we know that the defendant was involved? Well, the answer to that question is what the defendant said herself. Think back to what Tyler Hartman, the eyewitness, told you. It was the summer of 2012, and it was the defendant who said, Longstreet is onto our plan. Longstreet asked us about those wristbands. We were going to get caught. It was the defendant who said, I have a plan. It was the defendant who said, we're going to get caught. Here's a knife. Because it was the eyewitness who took that stand, and she told you that when they were caught, when Longstreet was talking about those wristbands, she saw the defendant hand her partner that knife. And that knife is what takes us to August 30th, and to the next 2 charges of robbery in the first degree and of murder. Now, to prove robbery in the first degree, all we had to show is that the defendant's partner used that knife on August 30th, threatened the accountant, took money from the ticket booth, and then the defendant made choices to help her partner to escape on that day. Now, the very person who was involved in this robbery admitted to robbing the ticket booth. Think back to what the limo driver told you today. The very first person that her partner called was the defendant. I used your knife. We were going to get caught. No one will know that you had anything to do with it. But we know that the defendant had everything to do with it. Because on August 30th, the defendant made choices to help her partner to get away from that robbery. She positioned herself at the right place, at the right time, at a riot called the Tunnel of Terror, to help her partner to escape. I want to stop for a minute and talk about the 3rd charge, that charge of felony murder. Because the law says that when a person dies as a result of a robbery, that's also murder. And we're not saying that the defendant intended to kill Officer Thomas. But on August 30th, when the defendant made a choice to put that ride into blackout mode, she made a choice that ultimately led to the death of Officer Thomas. She has to be held responsible. She has to be found guilty because her choices, well, they killed a man. Now, let's ask ourselves, why was the defendant at that ride in the first place? Now, opposing counsel wants you to believe that she was just there by coincidence. But the ride operator, Billy Isaac, she told you today that for the first time ever, on August 30th, the defendant demanded to work that ride. You see, maybe had the defendant just walked across the park once, or twice, or even 3 times, well, maybe that could be a coincidence. That's not what she did. The defendant walked across the park a 4th time, and a 5th time, and a 6th time, and a 7th time, and an 8th time, and when that didn't work, the defendant said whatever she needed to say just to get behind the controls of the ride. Now, we've spent a lot of time today talking about 2 different places, that ride, the Tunnel of Terror, and the main ticket booth. And that's because on August 30th, when her partner robbed that ticket booth, he didn't just turn and run out that main entrance. Instead, her partner made a conscious decision to run all the way through the park to a door that was supposed to be locked. Why would he run to a door that was supposed to be locked? Well, that's because on just 2 days before the robbery, the defendant, she watched that lock being installed. Just 2 days before the robbery, the defendant had the key to unlock that door. And just 2 days before the robbery, she told her partner, "We have to keep that lock in mind." She made choices to be at that ride at the right place at the right time just to help her partner escape. I want you to look at something. That's the control panel for the Tunnel of Terror. Look at how simple it is. Today we heard that over the summer of 2012, the defendant, she knew how to work that ride, and not once did she ever make a single mistake operating it. But they want you to believe that on August 30th, she made a mistake. Think back to what we heard today. Tyler Hartman was on that ride. A gunshot was fired, and then she started the ride. And then she waited. And she waited. And then her partner ran into the ride and she turned out the lights. And then she waited. And then as soon as her partner got out the door, well, that's when she stopped the ride. Members of the jury, I only waited 10 seconds. She waited over a minute. That was her choice, and it was all a part of her plan. Opposing counsel today, they have blamed everyone but the defendant. They have blamed the accountant, the park owner, the defendant's partner. Everyone but the defendant. That's just not reasonable. And that is certainly not reasonable doubt. We have met our burden in today's case. We have shown that her choices were all a part of her plan. A plan that led to a robber escaping and Officer Thomas losing his life. That's why we ask that you find the defendant guilty